Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me for this Patreon early access episode, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? So this is one of our Patreon early access episodes. If you support us over on patreon.com/slash that nerdy site at the dollar level or above, you get early access to bonus episodes every month like this one, where we kind of break the format of like talking about what we've been playing, what we've been watching, and we kind of just focus on a topic to discuss for the episode. Today's episode is going to be all about our gaming blind spots. So kind of those gaming those notable games or franchises that we just haven't really ever picked up ourselves. If you want, if you enjoy what you hear, please, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, share the podcast, all that fun stuff. If you're hearing this a month after it has gone live to our patrons when we put this out for everybody, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/slash that nerdy site, like I said, where you get to see this, a little early, or listen to it a little early. As we do every month on these, a shout out to our monthly Patreon producers who support us at the whatever level that is on Patreon. I haven't looked at the tiers in a while, but our monthly Patreon producers, Pam Larson, Sherry Starkey, Teresa Wilkinson, and myself, Trevor Starkey. You can support us over there at a certain level and above, and you'll get kind of monthly shout out. If you support us at like a super crazy level, we will shout you out weekly, but we don't have any of those guys yet. So yeah, let us dive right on in. Cam, do you have any notable gaming blind spots you want to kick us off with?
I think probably the most egregious of my gaming blind spots is probably the Uncharted series.
Okay. Like you just haven't played
Uh,
any of them? Because I know we've talked about them, and I thought you just didn't like them.
I don't like that style of game.
Okay.
Like that Tomb Raider. Um, like I like I just like that kind of like gameplay and like that linear corridor story stuff. I mean, even if they expanded out further, like this sort of like Indiana Jones video game feeling. Like I've never gotten into it. Granted, I like there's other things on top of that. Uh, I've seen a lot of the games being played.
Yeah. Okay.
Like this is the thing. It's like it's not like I am like, oh yeah, like I've never even paid attention to these games. That everybody loves and talks about. It's like I've paid attention to them. I've watched people stream them. I've watched like I've been in the room while people play it.
Just
Like it
just not
is,
for you, not your hands-on
yeah,
kind of experience.
yeah, like it's just for me, like it's like, oh, do you have any interest in playing? No. Like, but because of that, it's like these monumental personal experiences people have of these like big cinematic moments in the Uncharted series are just like totally lost on me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't understand. Like, I've watched enough of the games to know like the characters well enough that like why any of these people still talk to each other, I don't understand.
I
In the
mean,
first
it's
game alone,
there's drama, sure, and some backstabbing and stuff, but yeah, it's. I mean, I
oh,
think
also
if
the
you
fact that
like,
like the
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say the fact that like at the end of two, he picks the woman who has constantly betrayed him at every turn over somebody who is like also like don't get me wrong, I'm a Claudia Black simp for
Mm-hmm.
sure. So like like Chloe from the Uncharted series, like it's like, oh, who's the best girl from Uncharted? It's Chloe because she's voiced by Claudia Black. It's that easy.
Okay. I
Um,
mean, well,
but
you have
yeah,
an incorrect interpretation on that. Is that
yeah, without a doubt.
so he is with her like throughout Uncharted 2, but it ends up not working out, and he realizes that he really prefers Elena. So, like, he goes back to Elena, and that's you know
I don't think he should go with like if realistically, if it doesn't work out with Chloe, you just shouldn't go back to like your like what like I don't understand. Like everybody's like this is like one of the best video game couples of all time. And it's like I don't see it. I don't understand it. And this is why like it's a big blind spot for me. Like, and it's not like I haven't tried to like try to get into them, like want to like learn more about it to see if like I really do want to like jump into this, because if I start one and I'd be like, oh yeah, I played through one, I didn't care, people are gonna be like, we gotta play two now, gotta play two because two's way better.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
I don't want to be part of that discussion. I don't want to sit here and like take a fat deuce on top of the Uncharted series. It's a beloved series. People like it. People enjoy it. Like all to you. Like if you enjoy that series, but for me, it's like as a blind spot for like these big like people like talk about like their top 10 moments in video games. Like if you like choose any modern games, Uncharted's probably going to be on there for most people.
I mean, they
Um,
definitely have like your big cinematic blockbustery kind of moments.
yeah,
In particular, like there's so many big set pieces in those games. Certainly, yeah. But I mean that makes sense if it's just not your kind of cup of tea. Um, yeah, I get it. I like on a similar front, not to that extent because I have played a couple of them, but I always I look back at Halo, where like I hadn't played any Halo games. I like the most I had played Halo was I went like a year or two into college. I went and like reconnected with some of my high school friends, and we played Halo. God, it was probably like it was either it might have been Halo 1 multiplayer like locally for an evening. It was either Halo 1 or Halo 2, and I had played like one.
you were in college your freshman year.
It was like a year or two into college, so it was 2004 2005 somewhere in there. Um,
I'm pretty sure they were probably playing Halo 2 then.
I mean, it's possible. Yeah, like I don't know the series well enough to know even the extent which one we were playing. Um, but yeah, it like because we played that for an evening, and that was like the most I touched Halo until like Master Chief Collection came out. And then I played through Halo 1 and 2 and was like, okay, like I'm good. I don't need to really hop back into that. And you talking about Uncharted reminds me because I played and I reviewed back when I was doing Trevor Trove. I reviewed the Uncharted Nathan Drake collection and those first couple games of the Halo collection, like all in one big post, where I basically did like a here's my like
I recall that.
quick hit review of each of the Uncharted games and each of these two Halo games. And I significantly prefer the Uncharted, but admittedly I had already played through all the Uncharted games. But yeah, Halo just didn't hold up for me, and I haven't really felt too compelled to go back for the rest of them.
That's fair.
It's something I do want to try and like remedy in the lead up to Halo Infinite. I've talked about that I think a couple times where I want to maybe either stream or just kind of get a friend play through those games like
Mhm.
co-op, not on Legendary mode. That's something Logan and I have talked about definitely because like he tried to get into them playing through on Legendary and it's like why would you do that
Why
to
would you do
yourself?
that?
Like playing with a friend of his playing through on Legendary. It's like no that like
That's a
I
terrible way to
I
experience a
watched
game.
enough of Greg Miller's streams trying to do that with Tim to know that's a dumb way
I
of trying
don't
to get into
understand why
those.
they did that. Like Greg hasn't played Halo games. Like you don't like. I hate it when people do that. They're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna introduce my friend to Halo, and we're gonna play on Legendary mode
Because
with
that's the way it
skulls
should be played.
active.
Yeah, it's like no, no,
That's the way it
no,
should be
it's not.
played." It's like first off, you like Legendary mode is for people who know how to play the game.
Hmm.
And know like more advanced tactics, not
And
people who are asking what button do I hit to throw a grenade again. Like
yeah,
if they have to ask that question, don't play on Legendary mode.
yeah,
I would say that if there's one Halo game that you should go back and play, it's Halo Reach.
that's what I've heard. Like I've heard that Halo Reach is a great introduction to the series because it is kind of the prequel game and kind
Yeah,
of sets it
it's
up and you're not tied to the the Master Chief character.
Master Chief. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think that because Reach has an ensemble cast, so it's easy to find people that you like in it.
mhm.
Um, and on top of that, it's much more of a like there is something very like it's an odd feeling. I don't want to spoil it. I know the
I,
game came out years ago, but it's one of those things that I think
I mean,
that are worth experiencing.
it's very. I mean, like without diving into like the specific spoilers because I obviously don't know them, but like I know just from the concept of the game and the pitch of the
Yeah.
game that it is very Rogue One like in nature. In that, like, well, you
Yes.
kind of know where the story is going, so it's
Like the fact
or
that
it's like
these
Crisis
yeah,
Core, I guess, would be another a great
Crisis Core
example.
is a better example.
Final Fantasy Crisis Core, which now is completely upended with Final Fantasy VII remake and all that stuff. But
I don't like.
I mean,
I don't know
we'll
because I
see.
think
Yeah, we'll see what
we'll
happens
see.
there.
We'll see. We'll see.
But
We'll
yeah,
see.
like that's
Can you imagine if they remade Crisis Core and put that out? That'd be amazing.
I really want them to, like, especially
Like
because
Genesis aside, the Genesis nonsense aside, it's still really good.
yeah, I mean the one of the ideas I've been like floating around, and it's one of the other pitches I almost made for us to do on this this episode was our friend Barrett Courtney posted last night that he's finished or he's putting the
Mm.
finishing touches on his Assassin's Creed in review series, and I almost was like we could talk about like what series would be a great series for an in review kind of thing, but that's also something I want to maybe not necessarily do for the channel, but like look at for the channel, for us for that nerdy site of like
Yeah,
diving into those.
it's a big
And one of
it's
them
a big
is, and one of
project.
the ones that was like floating around against him yesterday was Final Fantasy, and that's something that like theoretically here in the next few weeks I'll be like more or less announcing through the NES classic stuff anyway. But I kind of want to sit down and play through the Final Fantasy games again, like and so I've been recently going through and like collecting them or figuring out like the easiest ways to play them now on like modern systems or on Steam or something like that.
And like the best versions of them for sure.
I mean, like, I'm not even like, yeah, the best versions of them would be great, but I've downloaded or I've got Final Fantasy 2 on my phone and I've figured out how to stream a phone game if I really need to because there isn't like because I don't have I don't have a PlayStation TV or whatever it was, so you could play PSP and PS Vita games on your TV, or
Mm.
stream that and stuff. So I'm like I like. And Crisis Core is one of those where I was like, I would love to revisit Crisis Core, but I'm not gonna
Mm.
like pull out a PSP and try and like just sit down with that again. So I
Well, I
would
mean,
love them.
it's
I would love to
important.
see them like
Yeah.
remaster or.
Mm.
I mean, the real thing I would love would have been for them for PlayStation on the PS5 to figure out how to bring all those PS classics that I bought
Mm.
on the PSN that would work on my PS3, and bring them up to the modern systems.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Final Fantasy is a series that I'm looking at like revisiting, and Crisis Core in particular is one of the ones that I wouldn't be able to in an easy fashion right now. But that's a little
Well,
tangent.
yeah, to end that tangent, I would say if you like and it's important to note that if you people want to do this, as long as you own the game and the
Yeah,
system, you can use an emulator.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I know,
Um,
and I've
yeah,
like that's certainly another avenue I've looked into and stuff. Um, yeah, but I also
because that's how I first played Crisis Core was on an emulator. So
yeah. Yeah, I guess, and it's like my emulator like experiences don't go too far past like the SNES era, and that's largely because like that's probably when I was getting into emulators was like when that was as far as you could go, and have them work
yeah,
reliably. So yeah, I haven't even looked at stuff in recent years, but I did ping our friend Scott White. I don't know.
Professor RPG.
Yeah, Professor RPG. I pinged him. I don't know 7 or 8 months back because I had a craving to play Secret of Evermore, which is a game near and dear to my heart from the Super Nintendo. But I'm not gonna like bust out a Super Nintendo and try and figure out how to make one of those work on my my HDMI screens and stuff like that. So I was like, hey, like I have not one, I have two copies of that game, and I could like get off camera for a bit and go grab them and bring them over here. But I just kind of pinged him. I was like, hey, how would like you're the emulator guy I know. But can you point me in the direction? And he got me basically set up with that. I had to do a little troubleshooting because some of the stuff I did wasn't working. But yeah, then I sat down and just kind of like played through that game for a little bit. And kind of got like a nostalgic rush and was like blown away by like how much easier that game is now that I'm not 10 years old, and just understand a lot of those things better, or like can more easily remember the map and just kind of like get around the game easier. But yeah, another big kind of blind spot for me that I would touch on is kind of going even back to those like retro eras, is Metroid. Apart from like the little bit that I did of the original Metroid now on that retro gaming show on the channel, I've not ever played any Metroid. I guess technically I mentioned it on there too. Like I hopped into the 3DS Metroid remake
Okay.
a few years back, but like I probably didn't put more than half an hour into that. Like I picked it up to check it out, and then I just, because 3DS wasn't my platform of choice, I just didn't really give it much of a chance. So yeah, like no Metroids really. Like I obviously know Metroid and I know Samus as a character and all that stuff, but yeah, it's just never a series that I picked up. I didn't get into it on the original NES or Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo. And then just like as a result, never felt an affinity to it. So like all of the, like everybody excited for Metroid Prime 4 or like
Yeah.
a supposed Metroid Prime trilogy remaster or something like that. I'm just like, I couldn't tell you what, like any of those games. Similarly, because obviously it helped kind of co-form this genre, Castlevania, the only Castlevania game I've ever played was Symphony of the Night. And I only did that a few years back for the Kind of Funny Video Game Book Club.
Yeah. I will say, as a heads up though, I need to put this out here. Hot take warning. The best Metroid game is Metroid Bounty Hunters for the Nintendo DS.
Yeah. Okay. Is that the one that where you could play like strikers or whatever, soccer?
No, that's the one where you it was a first-person shooter,
Okay.
a la the Metroid Prime series,
Mm-hmm.
mixed with arena-based like multiplayer, and you could play as other bounty hunters besides Samus.
Okay.
So it was actually like, it was super cool because you got to see like what other bounty hunters look like in this universe that you only ever really see Samus.
Mm-hmm.
So it was cool.
I
There's
mean, I mean, yeah,
nice guy.
that is definitely a hot take because it also sounds like that isn't like that. Basically, just it's a reskinned other game with the Metroid skin, and has nothing to do with like the Metroid gameplay that like the rest of the series is probably known for.
It's in line, like the gameplay is in line with like, the Metroid Prime series.
You're like
'cause there's,
saying
like, a story mode and stuff.
the Uncharted card game is the best Uncharted game.
There's an Uncharted card game.
Yeah, I think there was something like that on the Vita maybe, or it might have been a PSP thing. But it was basically like I never even played it really, but it was some kind of like collectible card game-esque thing or something. And I think it was like more of a tie-in to Golden Abyss or something like that, if I recall correctly. I never really spent time with it. I only ever played like half of Golden Abyss anyway. But yeah, there was definitely something out there of some weird offshoot in the Uncharted brand. But yeah, like the whole Metroidvania. I've played a ton of Metroidvania games, but very few or none of the actual Metroids or Castlevanias. I didn't get into them at the time, and I've joked with Castlevania since that if I had known that one of the characters in Castlevania was Trevor, I probably would have gotten into that series. But yeah, it's just never really
Castlevania 3.
Yeah, never really connected with me. So I like that is probably a big old gaming blind spot apart from Symphony of the Night. How about you? Throw it back over to you for any others you have.
A big one for me is probably going to be they go kind of hand in hand because I'm pretty sure they're from the same production company, or at least publisher. But the Star Ocean and Xenogears series for the PS2.
Yeah, I mean, like
Um,
I definitely have not touched any of those games myself.
yeah, Star Ocean, like I always saw ads for, and it always looked really cool, but it just was like the games were like just not in like reasonable measures for me to obtain.
hmm
And by that I mean they never went like below $40 because they were almost always new. Nobody really had used copies of them. And then on top of that, Xenogears was one that's an interesting one because I think it's Xenogears is the one I'm thinking of. I better double check that real quick
Okay.
before I sound like a moron.
I'll throw into this mix. Because it occupies a similar space in my mind. The Tales of games, like Tales of Vesperia or whatever. Like I haven't played
Oh,
any
sorry, not Xenogears. Go ahead. The
Xenoblade.
Tales games.
Are you talking Xenoblade then?
Xeno. No, I'm not.
No.
What am I thinking of?
Well, yeah, I've not played any of those, and like really, I think kind of at the core seat of that is I was so like I so was raised on SquareSoft and Enix and Square Enix games,
Hmm.
i.e., Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, that like those were my RPGs, my JRPGs of choice. And so I just really, very rarely branched out into other JRPGs. So yeah, there's a whole, you know, like that's where I think of like all of the other JRPGs that were on like the original PlayStation and stuff like that. Um, where I'm just like, yeah, no, my original PlayStation was a Final Fantasy system for me. Like I had all of the, like I had 7, 8, 9. I had Final Fantasy Anthology, which was I believe 5 and 6. I had Final Fantasy Chronicles, which was like Final Fantasy. I think that was 4 in Chrono Trigger, and then I had Final Fantasy Origins, which was 1 and 2. So I had like every Final Fantasy up to that point except 3, which wasn't released on the original PlayStation, on the original PlayStation. And then yeah, just very little. Like even in that conversation, like Chrono Trigger is a game that I didn't really play until the DS version, because I had just missed it in the original Super Nintendo era. Did you ever figure out what your Xenogears esque game was?
Trying to think. Yeah, it was shoot, this is really bugging me because I mixed up Xenogears, which is a PS1 game,
Mm-hmm.
with this game that I'm thinking of, and I just cannot for the life of me remember it. Um, the reason I brought it up is because it is part of an era of games that like they were doing a lot of Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3 type stuff from like
Oh,
JRPGs,
like the dot hacks.
like the dot hacks. But then there was also like there was another series that came out around the same time as the dot hack games that like I knew had like a pretty big following in regards to uh just like the I guess like the proto like weeb culture, like
Okay.
before like the anime like gaming and culture and stuff, like the kind of like typical stuff you see in regards to that. At like like this is like back in the days when, gosh, I had to have been like this is I'm talking back like in 2002, 2003, 2004.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going through like a list of PS2 games trying to get down to the because I know it starts with an X. And would you believe it if I told you there are a lot of PS2 games?
I mean, yeah, there because of what that like before the digital era, that was the most developed for system of like I want to say there were like over 100, over 1,000 physical release. I mean, well, obviously because digital wasn't really a thing yet, but over 1,000
Hmm.
different PlayStation 2 games, if I recall correctly. Um, so yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Um, uh,
Gosh,
while
so
you're
much.
continuing to look for that, I'll pull in a similar thing where like because you're hung up on the like it was an
Xenosaga, that's what it is.
okay
Xenosaga.
Xenosaga. In a similar like I always get these franchises confused conversation because I haven't played any of them. I have Splinter Cell and Siphon Filter. So much so that like when I was compiling this list before we started recording this morning, I was like, I remembered Splinter Cell, and I was like, what's the other one I always forget? And I know like Roger Corney, I think really likes one of them. I don't remember which one it is. And I finally landed on Siphon
He
Filter.
likes Splinter Cell.
Okay. But even then,
he really
even
likes,
as we were
yeah.
as we were just looking up stuff there, I was like, another one that kind of falls in that same bucket is SOCOM, as another one that like is like you could throw all of those in a bucket and show me screenshots, and I'd be like, I don't know which of these is which, just because like they all occupy a similar like military, not first person shooter type of game, from an era where I wasn't playing military shooters of anything or stealth or whatever. Like they are from the era where I was playing, a lot of Final Fantasy stuff, or maybe I was starting to get into your God of Wars and your more action adventure stuff. And so yeah, those series are the other ones where I'm just like, yep, I have not touched a single one of those, and couldn't pick them out of a lineup. But so you finally landed on Xenosaga. So what are like
Yeah,
is Xenosaga a similar kind of thing of like it's a whole bunch of different RPGs with like
Yeah.
spin-off groups and stuff like that? Like when I think of Xenosaga, I immediately would think of something similar to the Tales series where it's like these are all loosely related in themes and maybe enemy types and stuff like that.
So
I guess in like it'd be
so
similar
no,
to like the Final Fantasies and the Dragon Quests too, where it's like none of the games really tie to one another, but there's a whole bunch of shared elements.
so no, actually, Xenosaga was a like 3-volume game telling an overarching story.
Okay.
Um, it's a trilogy of games, and it came out, like I mentioned, it came out during a time of like when it was you did have these the PS2 era was such a long period of time
Mm-hmm.
that
And
you had
development
these
cycle was
games that,
just like a lot shorter. Like you
yeah.
could put more games out on that system because you weren't spending 5 years making a game.
Yeah, let me go ahead. I wanted to link in chat in the Discord chat. I would, but all the images I can find are absolutely tiny and garbage because we're talking about like the cover of a PS2 game.
I mean, it's fine.
Um,
I can Google it here on my
yeah,
phone.
if you Google it, you'll find it. So like this was a very much a it plays into it's a sci-fi game, and it played way more into a sort of uh like
Oh
it
yeah,
played
okay, I remember.
into the covers. I feel like the cover's weirdly iconic of the
Mm-hmm.
first game. Like it decorated GameStop shelves for several years in my mind, but I never picked it up. I always thought about doing it because I was interested in I had friends. This is back also like when it was like I was just starting to make online friends for the first time, which now you're like, oh yeah, friends you never meet in person, especially with last year being like and this year being what they
Yeah.
are.
I mean, we originally met more or less as online friends.
We did.
Like,
We did meet as like we grew up literally 20 30 minutes apart,
mm-hmm.
and like we met for the first time in a different city,
Yep.
different state. So yeah, I definitely think we qualify as like online friends turned real, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, like I just started getting my first like internet friends, and these were a lot of guys and gals who were like just a few years older than me, so they were working, and some of them were in college and stuff, so they had disposable income, and so they were picking up these games that were a little bit outside my price range. I had to reserve my funds for like the big titles like Dot Hack, and even then I actually
Yes.
couldn't afford to buy all the Dot Hack games. I had to rent them from Hollywood. Like there was one Hollywood video store off of
that carried them.
that carry. Well, no. So the this is how I played the Dot Hack series.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the first one. Volume 1 bought. It was like a gift, like, hey, like I can go pick out a game for my birthday or something, and I picked up that game. Actually, I think I got it as an early birthday present, because it was like 2 months before my birthday, and I'm like, this can be my birthday present. It's fine. So I got it. And then Volume 2 came out, and like I'm like, man, I have to find a place that will rent it to me. And I was calling around. I called the Blockbusters. They didn't have it. And then I found a Hollywood Video that had it off of Alma School and Main Street. Um, and it was also Hollywood Video used to have a kind of like quote unquote like GameStop like shop next to it.
Yeah, Game Crazy. I remember.
Game Crazy, yeah, Game Crazy.
I had
So
one like
Game,
right at the the like the Fry's complex, Fry's Food and Drug complex, like right down the street from me, and they were still there when I moved into this apartment. So like it's which admittedly I've been here for a long time, but like yeah, that was
yeah,
during college. Like there were still game crazies and Hollywood videos
yeah,
around.
yeah. Hollywood Video was would rent, and this is the craziest thing. They had part like Volume 2, Dot Hack / Mutation, and then Dot Hack Quarantine for rent there. But they
Quarantine
didn't
was 4,
have,
right? Yeah, that was
yeah.
game 4.
So
So they
they're
didn't
missing
have
3. They miss an Outbreak. That's the
Outbreak.
third one.
Okay.
Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, Quarantine,
Yeah.
which is a weird thing to say now during a pandemic. Uh, but like, and so I had to like save up money to buy part 3 so that I could play it because there was nobody who was renting it.
Yeah.
And so I had to make hard choices, Trevor. I had
Yeah.
to make hard choices about like what like this is people don't understand. They're like kids today, they're like, what's the big deal about console wars? What's the big deal about like these like and it's like you didn't understand. There were limited resources back then.
I am one of the things I am most amazed by is there were limited resources and PS2 era is that era where like I went to a Game Crazy or GameStop or something like that and just traded in like a whole crap ton of my library. And it's one of those things like I regret because I had like a ton of bad games that like I would never touch again, but there were also I'm sure some gems in there. And I'm actually like amazed that I still have the Dot Hack games. Like I'm still amazed I still have that quadrilogy of games because yeah, I'm just like I like those were definitely a point in time for me, but I couldn't like I so barely remember what the story of that game was and all that stuff that like
I remember it.
I mean I know you do because you're a crazy person like that but yeah it's like
Yeah.
how did like when I was trading in all of those other things how did I keep that and only getting like a quarter for them or some bullshit like that
Yeah.
like and I was fine with that.
If you thought GameStop's trade-in and like exchange policy was bad, you were not familiar with Game Crazy.
Yeah.
That would literally offer you a penny or a nickel for a game.
Yeah, it was like this Lord of the Rings game, which wasn't the like Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings. It was like the officially licensed Lord of the Rings game on PS2 or whatever. They're like, this isn't in our database, so I'll give you 25 cents for it. And I was like, whatever, I'm never gonna play this again. Yeah.
That does them, man. They also had like a TV at my local Game Crazy. They had a TV setup
Mm-hmm.
that had Soul Calibur 2 on it.
Yeah.
And I swear, every time almost every time I went in, there was the same dude, like running down on kids who'd like be willing to play him and fight him, and just like wasting them and like mocking them. And like eventually, I got tired of it. And I was like, all right, man, like I'll fight you, I'll play against you. And he was pretty good, but like he picked Astaroth and he was just using the cheat moves over and over again. So I went with Nightmare, and I whooped his ass so hard. And then I like the story would go like, and then he never showed back up. except he did,
Yeah.
because like this is what he did with his free time.
Because this
Uh,
wasn't an 80s like villain
yeah,
movie or whatever. This wasn't The Karate Kid and it just ended
yeah,
there.
I like I wasn't some big hero. He like verbally accosted me for like being cheap
Mm.
and like using like I'm like, dude, you're playing Astaroth. I'm sorry. And he goes, you're just going back to the well for the same moves over and over again or something like that.
I mean,
And I'm like, whatever, dude.
I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, like in terms of like fighting game franchises like Soul Calibur, Tekken, Virtua Fighter being like another iconic one from growing up. Like I never touched any of those in the arcades or on home consoles and stuff. Like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were really the only two I ever touched in terms of fighting games. Um,
Did
like
you ever
even
play the Marvel vs. Capcom
I mean
games?
even that like not really. Like I like the most distinct memory I have of Marvel vs. Capcom is actually playing it in the Star Wars or in the Star Wars arcade at Disneyland back when they had an arcade at Disneyland. Like
Yeah.
I remember playing it there for whatever reason. Like that is burned in my brain. But like even that would have been like one day when I was, like 12 or something like that, like on a family trip to Disneyland. Yeah, that was just another one. Like even the X-Men arcade game, I have very little memory of like ever sitting down and actually playing through. Like me and my group of friends were much more like we played Simpsons and we played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't really remember us ever playing the X-Men one, and I don't know if that was just it wasn't around at the arcades we had because it was also like originally it was like a 6-person arcade. It was like so you had to have like an arcade like or a place that was like that invested in arcade games. And I don't know how many of our local places were, but yeah, like I mean, until recently, Tony Hawk was another blind spot for me, and more or less still is because I've really only ever played the warehouse level of Tony Hawk 1 and 2. So in the remaster, but yeah.
Oh, my brother-in-law set up his N64 on it in his office.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's just like trying out like different streaming stuff, and he he had just had it there, and we were talking, and I was just like, I'm just gonna boot this up, and it was Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Was the blue cartridge was in the N64. I booted that thing up, and I'm like, this game looks rough, but
Yeah.
still plays super well. Like controls are tight as hell. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's still such a great game. But I forgot. Like I'm like, how do I crouch again on the N64? Like it was fun.
Was it one of
It's
the
a lot of fun.
was it one of the C buttons or something?
It was the C buttons. All the tricks and stuff were controlled by the C buttons. I had forgotten.
Hmm.
Um, gosh, yeah, no. Like that series is like near and dear to my heart. But uh, and it's funny that you didn't get into it. Well, not it's not funny you didn't get into it. It's interesting that like it didn't catch you up in it because it felt like everybody was caught up in it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like I was
But then
never
again,
I was never in
but then again, I
skater
have to
culture
remember
or anything like that.
that's
Yeah,
the thing. Yeah,
yeah. Like
yeah.
I got a skateboard when I was like 5 or 6 or something. Like I got a skateboard as a kindergarten birthday present and tried skateboarding and fell and was like never again. And so like it just my skateboarding and there's another like arcade memory is most tied to that arcade game's Top Skater, I believe it was, where it was like
The
the
one that
big
says
one
winners don't do drugs. Yeah.
probably where it was like the big stand up like you stood on a
Mm-hmm.
thing, there was like handrails for you to and you it was just like you were going down and you controlled it with your feet. Like I played that a ton at the arcade. But yeah, I never got into Tony Hawk. So yeah, another
Yeah.
blind
No,
spot
I
for me
was.
there. And it was also like
Uh,
like since music has never really been my like artistic medium of choice, like I didn't care about the crazy great soundtracks that those games had because I was just like like if I'm gonna be listening to that music, I was listening to it on like the Edge or whatever, and didn't and it was just at a time where I was like not my cup of
yeah.
tea. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
another.
No, that was. Yeah, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, no, because I was definitely like knee deep in skater culture at the time. Um, Granted, I was like, it also like did not help that like my mom was really against me skating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my mom has like just like a weird like her like one of her really good childhood friends died when they were teenagers after like a weird accident while skateboarding. And so when my dad convinced my mom to let my brother get a skateboard for like his 10th birthday, and then like same day he like slipped up and ended up needing like 30 stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Not that many. I don't know. But he needed stitches, and after that, my mom was like, "No, no more. Like this is like this is a bane on this household."
Yeah.
And so I was never allowed to own a skateboard. So I would skate on my friends' boards. And that was fine. They were cool with it. Like my friends usually had like a couple of decks that like we could just like um that they could like just throw together and it'd be fine. Uh, but yeah, no, it was like it was crazy. It was
Mm-hmm.
like that was a wild time. That was also like also skater culture. Looking back on it now, like my mom also was probably concerned about like how
Drugs and stuff.
no, not drugs, like the anti-authoritarianism of skating
Okay.
culture.
Okay.
Um, my parents are like I love my parents dearly, but like you know they have, in my opinion, far too much trust in the police. Um, I digress, but like no, there was definitely like the kind of like rebellious anti-authoritarian
Mm-hmm.
streak that I've always kind of had ever since I was a kid, like a little kid.
Yeah.
Certainly was not helped by being part of skater culture,
Yeah.
which not only flaunted breaking the law, but like the like very existence of where like people would skate was trespassing and breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
On top of also that's also around the time I got into tagging. Um, yeah, like no, my parents had plenty to be concerned about. I was not
Yeah.
like a good kid. Like
Sounds
I was
like it.
I was a real piece of shit.
You were
So
a
like
hoodlum. You
looking
were
back,
you were
I
one of them hoodlums characters. Yeah.
I was legitimately like like no, but like I'm thinking back to like the like stuff I haven't thought about that I did in the past in a
Mm-hmm.
really long time, and it's like, huh. Somehow I ended up like a reasonable member of society, like a
Yeah.
reasonably decent member of society.
I mean, fortunately, we
Um,
grow up, most of us. So yeah,
yeah.
works out. Any circling back to blind spots? Any other notable gaming blind spots you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Yeah. Another. Now this is probably going to come to a shock for a lot of people out there. Um, I never played Mario games. I've never played a Mario game in my life.
I feel like that's not true.
It's a lie. It's a lie. I can't think of anything else. I'm like let me state like the bold faced lie. Super Mario Brothers 3 is the first video game I ever remember playing. So like it is without a doubt like the absolute bullshit.
Yeah, it was
I'm like
like
is there like I'm like ah
the one you could have done that would have won up that was like I've just never played Tetris. It's just never like with your
So hear me out.
devout love
Yeah.
for Tetris Effect. It's just
Oh, you know
I
what?
respect what they
Let's
do. I've
go.
never actually gone hands on with it.
I'll be honest. I never understood the craze.
Yeah.
It's a comic game. Why would we be interested in it? No. Actually, coinciding between Mario and Tetris, I have a real blind spot for Dr. Mario. I've never played a Dr. Mario game.
Okay. I mean, there are only like a couple of them, so you
Yeah.
like, but yeah. I mean,
We
especially
have
if
one
you
for
were
a
like
few-
so diehard like for Tetris, it makes sense.
Well, the weird thing is, my mom, like, we used to have this like collection of games for the Windows 95.
Mm-hmm.
Those like game collections that had like just a million and one
Yeah.
like games in like that install.
And like 900 of them
And-
were like pinball.
Yeah. Well, one of them was Dr. Mario for the PC, and my mom played that game a lot. Like, a lot. Like, looking back on it now, I'm thinking about it. Like, man, my mom was actually, like, she didn't play, she wasn't like a Farmville lady. but like there was like if it had to do with Dr. Mario, uh, Hangman, or crosswords, that was like 100% her shtick.
Okay.
So there was a Kangaroo Hangman game that she played a lot of, and I'm pretty sure gave her computer viruses, and then they blamed it, on the games that I played.
Fair enough.
Because that's what happens. You are a 14-year-old boy. You've clearly put viruses on our computer.
I mean, in my family's house, that was the case sometimes because of the random like Sims mods that I downloaded onto our computer and stuff like that. It was like, oh, turns out that that extra set of like different like the hippie colored bathroom set that I downloaded because I thought it looked cool had something else in there. Something like yeah. So, oops, sorry, mom and dad. Yeah. The last one I have that I would touch on is it's not too much of a surprise especially for gamers of my age, I think, but like Minecraft just completely passed me by or is like came around after I was of the like age where Minecraft would have been, where I would have been mostly exposed to it. So I just have never actually touched Minecraft. Despite it being like available on like everything I could play it on.
Yeah.
I just never spent any time with it. I constantly like look at it when I'm doing Game Pass stuff where I'm like, do I want to finally dive into some Minecraft? No.
Yeah. I lost a month of my life to Minecraft. This is 2008, 2009. Just got into it. Didn't do anything else besides that and go to work for a month. My friends didn't know where I'd gone.
Well, there you go. So yeah, those are some of our gaming blind spots. Yeah, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised because I was like, I feel like I would have way more of like the really big ones, the really notable ones. But when I went and like looked at like list of like biggest franchises and stuff, I was like, well, I've played at least some of all of those. Like, I guess Madden would be another one where I'm like, I don't think I've ever really played a Madden game. I
played a lot.
Like I played the NFL Blitz kind of games, and I touch on that on the most recent retro gaming that I recorded of Tecmo Bowl, because Tecmo Bowl was another one. Like I'd never played it on the NES, so this was like my first time playing that. But yeah, I played your NFL Blitz and NBA Jams were like my level of sports game in that era. But yeah, like even NBA 2K and FIFA and stuff, like I've played like at least one of those games. And I finally sat down a few years ago and played a Call of Duty, so so it's not like a full blind spot in a lot of those. Like I've at least dabbled with most of the big ones. Even like I guess Gran Turismo, I haven't ever touched a Gran Turismo, but like Forza, I got really into Forza Horizon 4 for a little while there when they did the Lego release, because I'm a sucker for Lego stuff. So, but yeah, like a lot of the other series, I was like, yeah, I've played a lot of those. One of the ones that it's not a blind spot, but it's one I want to revisit, so I picked it up because I thought I think it was on sale this week. Is Bully, because of like how much like you and Logan, I think, really like beat the Bully drum. And I'm just like, I played it back when it came out because I was a fan of like the GTA games and stuff. So I was like, oh, let me check out this new game that Rockstar's doing. And I played it, and like I enjoyed it well enough at the time, but like I have zero memories of that game really. So I was like, let me like pick that up and maybe do like a stream of it sometime soon, to try and like revisit that game to see why it resonates with like you guys and a ton of people. Obviously that's like a game that like a lot of people want either a remaster of or a sequel to or whatever, and it's just like it's one that I've never been clamoring for myself, and so I thought about like trying to circle back and revisit it.
There is something, so it takes like the Bully game is one of those games and stories that I touched on in my Wintermoor Tactics Club review, where I talk about like the idyllic East Coast, like Northeast Coast, just northeastern a United States private school, like boarding school, kind of like fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And Bully does that while at the same time being really interesting. Look at like Americana in the 1950s, like late 50s, early 60s era that Bully takes place in. Because a lot of things in there are like really old and archaic, and it's so fun to like thinking about that game just now just like fills me with so many memories of when I first played it, and then like going back and playing it again. Like it's a great game, and yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I have it. I re-downloaded it, or I downloaded it on my PS5, so it's there on my cross media bar if I want to hop into it and play it anytime soon. Yakuza is a series that certainly would have been on this list, but I've been playing through those games, and we'll talk about that on the next podcast we record right after this, which is the regular weekly show. Because yeah, that's basically what I've been playing through for most of January. I've been playing through the Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2, and I'm about maybe a third of the way through Yakuza 0 right now. So
Hmm.
yeah, that is no longer a series that I could say is a blind spot to me. Still, like Shenmue, I guess, would be another one, because like as I've been playing through Yakuza, I've been like as an outsider to both of these franchises, there's a lot of stuff in Yakuza that is what I thought Shenmue was, because like of just the obscure side quests and mini games and stuff that I understand to be in both.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's going to do it for this Patreon early access episode of that nerdy site show, not that nerdy game show. Thank you, Cam, for joining me here. Trying to think if there's anything special I need to do for the outro on this one. Since this is more of a timeless episode, we won't really do plugs, but you can follow Cam at Rev Cabot. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, once again, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. I actually, for the first time since we've launched really anything That Nerdy Site-wise, figured out how to go look at iTunes reviews, and was like, has anybody actually reviewed any of our sites, any of our podcasts? And unsurprisingly, probably because the numbers on that show were pretty good, that Wannabe Film Class has the most reviews of anything, and even that's only like 5 reviews, I think. So yeah, go review us on iTunes if you listen over there. Help us, discoverability, all that blah blah blah. But you can also support us on patreon.com/thatnerdysite if you don't already, if you are not one of the few patrons that could have listened to this in the month that we debuted it for our patrons. If you're listening to this after the fact, you can go get it early on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite for $1 or above. It's just kind of a bonus little early access thing we do over there. But thank you again for joining me, Cam. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.